Welcome to the Easton School Committee meeting of Thursday, September 3rd, 2020. In keeping with the ongoing emergency order from Governor Charlie Baker to limit gatherings and maximize social distancing, and under legislation passed to address remote board meetings during the emergency declaration, this meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board members will be remote, and remote attendance shall count towards quorum. The meeting is broadcast via ECAT and Facebook Live, and there will be a recorded version as soon as possible on ECAT. If you would like to ask a question, type a question into the Q&A. Please, before you type your question, type your name and address, and then we will hopefully get to your question as the meeting progresses during public comment. Now, at this point, I'm going to make a motion to move into executive session, and we will return in order to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for the Easton Educators Association Unit A. And in my opinion, having this discussion in open meeting would be detrimental to the bargaining position of the school committee. Do I have a second?
O'Neill, second.
Okay, now I need a roll call, please.
O'Neill, yes.
Grants, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes. Star, yes.
Okay, we will be back. Caroline, good luck. Okay, 1, 2, so we're waiting for Michelle and Jen. I feel like I've
Michelle's
been,
there.
We're just,
Michelle's there.
oh, I see Michelle. Jen and Jackie. I meant Jen and Jackie. I feel like when I do that, we're in like a sci-fi movie and you're transported to another land. It's kind of crazy.
I like that analogy, a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
Maybe this whole thing is a dream, bad dream.
That would be it.
Okay. All right, very good. Everyone's here. All right, welcome back to the Easton School Committee meeting of Thursday, September 3rd, 2020. Just a reminder, as we go through, if you have any questions, type them into the Q&A with your name and address, okay? Next up on the agenda are the minutes from July 28th, 2020. Does anyone have any comments, questions, or corrections? And Lynn, thank you very much for doing these minutes, about what, 15 pages. Anyone? Questions, corrections? Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the Easton School Committee meeting minutes of Tuesday, July 28th?
So moved, Star.
Okay, and do I,
Wiseman, second.
thank you. All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Grants, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes. Star, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up is the approval of Lucini in-district special education contract.
So thank you, David Twombly, Director of Operations is here. This is the piece of the contract that was missing last week for in-district special education transportation. David can talk you through it and answer any questions you may have. David?
Yep. So, we have the in-district special education transportation. It's going to be $275 per van per day. Previously, the van cost was $250 per day per van. So he's gone up about $25 per van. So it's pretty straightforward. I mean, we've had Bill obviously has done the regular transportation. He now does the in-district sped transportation. And I think overall he's done a good job. It's nice having a company who's familiar with Easton, especially with the COVID situation. I think it really helps out a lot. So it's pretty much, we're just looking for a motion to approve the in-district special education transportation contract to Lucini Transportation. If you have any questions, I can answer them.
How many vans do we use every day?
I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure. I think it's around 6 or 7 vans typically. This year is
Yeah,
going to be
7.
7. So I think this year is going to be an interesting year because where we have the COVID, some kids, depending on, some are going Group A, Group B, then you have the whole thing on Wednesday mornings, and then you have kids that have to get transported after school. So I'm not quite sure how many vans we'll use this year. I anticipate it would be probably close to the 7, but it all depends on how many kids want to go remote. Obviously, we have to de-densify the vans, similar to what we have to do with the buses. So this is kind of a moving target, and we'll find out probably next week because we did give the file to Lucini today to start putting students onto buses. So we'll start getting counts probably in the next week or so.
Jen?
All right, so was the prior contract for 2018 to 2020 at $250 per bus per day?
Yeah, it's 2 years, a 2-year contract, correct. Yep.
Okay, so this is a 10% increase, which seems higher than the rate of increase that we can reasonably sustain. Do we have any concerns about that?
That was my question too.
I mean, it's really up to, if we have concerns, we can certainly go back to Mr. Lucini and talk to him and see if he can lower the price. We've done that in the past, but it's really up to the committee as far as how you feel about the contract.
David,
What-
for how long a period is this? Is it just 1 year?
No, it's just 2 years, 2 years.
So
contract.
it's 2 years with no, I mean, I don't have a copy of the contract. I don't know if I missed it somehow, but so is it 2 years with no additional increase the second year?
Yep, just two years. The rate stays the same for the 2 years. So it's 275 for this year, 275 for next year, for the year after, yes.
Okay,
Does this
so,
also have the 3rd-year option like the other bus contract?
No, this one doesn't have a 3rd-year option. I mean, certainly next year at this time, if we felt compelled, we could enter into negotiations to add a 3rd year. We could talk to them and say, hey, we want to add a 3rd year, but we want the rate to stay the same. Sometimes companies are willing to maintain the rate the same if they're going to get an extra year, but that's like a whole year away. So
yeah. So the prior 250 per bus per day, did that go all the way back to 2018? So would it be accurate to say that this is the first increase since the original contract? Because I think a 10% increase over, a 4 to 5 year period is different.
yeah. To be quite honest with you, I'd have to go back and research that. I feel like it was maybe 225, but I really don't want to get quoted on that. I'd have
Okay.
to research it, but it is a 2-year contract. You are correct. It was fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20. This would be fiscal year 21.
Okay. I mean, I definitely have concern about the rate of increase. I mean, it seems like it makes sense to go in, $25 increments and whatever, but that's a rate that I don't think we're seeing in other contracts. Certainly not. I just don't think any of the other line items are
In terms
increasing
of
at
our,
that rate.
in terms of our payments for transportation, both on the larger buses and the vans, we are in our regional comps
Okay.
in terms of what we're
helpful.
paying.
I think the other thing too is that I think with the pandemic, there's extra costs that they're incurring as far as cleaning the vans more often, in between runs. So they're going to have some of their staff may end up working a few more hours. So I think that, kind of may have impacted kind of the bid that they submitted. Typically, it might have been like a 4 or 5% increase or 2% or whatever. But I think this year with the pandemic and some of the sanitation stuff they have to do with the vans cleaning, they probably had to go up a little bit.
Okay. Can we compare this to, and again, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble tracking all the transportation contracts that we've looked at. Was there an increase for VHS? Because I think that's probably the closest comparable for the type of service.
Again, I'd have to go research that. I think they did go up a percentage, but I'm not sure what the exact percentage is for VHS. Can certainly check into that for you. We can bring this on to the next committee meeting if you want. It's really up to you.
I'd be in favor of maybe kind of getting a little bit of further benchmarking on, comparing to VHS. But I'm
trying
just
to
one
get
person,
Marilyn.
so.
I don't see her.
I have another question, which is, will there potentially be more runs than usual? In other words,
Well, that's the thing that we don't really know, because with the pandemic, I'm not sure which cohort some of these students will be in. So, and then you also have some students who are going to be, possibly remote. So it's kind of a moving target at this point.
Well, we have increased our runs. It's going to be a little difficult to compare those two vendors because they charge us differently. So VHS, for example, charges us by the number of students on a vehicle at any time. And Lucini charges us by the bus. So for example, the fact that we have gone from a morning run and an afternoon run to a morning run, a run after 4.5 hours, and then an afternoon run for high needs learners, we do not pay extra for that because we have that bus for the whole day.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
So there are a lot of intricacies in how we negotiate different aspects of the contract. I think we also told you that we had For VHS, we had provided some supplies for them to use for our runs as opposed to paying what they were going to charge us for that, because we wanted it to be consistent with the quality and the frequency we were using in school. So that's also a little bit different. So comparing the two is a little bit different for those reasons, but in terms of, you know, will extra runs affect us? They will not affect us because we pay for the bus for the day.
And isn't it
Now, within
possible that-
reason, because for example, if there's an evening event, students are, you know, we pay separately for sporting events, for example.
Mhm.
But during the school day, we have them for the run. So we were able to negotiate different aspects based on the way they charge us differently, if that makes
Could,
sense.
Okay.
could there potentially be more runs just based on the social distancing requirements as well? Because some vans do have more, obviously, a few students, right? So
In terms of the vans, it's going to depend because we're still trying to, they've sent out the principals are all sending out notices about who they have determined to be high need students. They're accepting responses now. A parent does not have to take advantage of that, of those services if they do not want to. So right now they're trying to determine exactly how many students are they expecting for the 4.5 days a week. Then they're going to determine how many of them are going to be staying the full day in the afternoons, or how many of them might perhaps be in cohorts. I don't believe many are going to be remote, but they're determining that right now. That's a little bit after all the other students. So they're in that process right now. Once we know that, then we'll have a better understanding of how many students are actually going to be on the vans. Now, if we need to increase the number of vans, that would be an increased cost. So we would always explore multiple runs before we did something like that.
I also think Leisha brings up a very good point. Compared to in the past, there's pretty much two runs. There's a run in the morning and then there's a run at the end of the day. But in this particular case, with the pandemic, we're going to have possibly 3 runs in one day. You could have a pickup in the morning, one in the midday or so, and then you're going to have one at the end of the day. So they're actually going to be using the vans a lot more and putting more hours in, most likely.
Any other questions? Do you want, Jen,
was
do you still
Marilyn,
want to hold off on this?
I'm just wondering, was Marilyn able to connect? I think she was looking.
It says
to-
connecting to audio. She's not quite on yet.
Okay, so looking at, all right, so if it's truly, all right, if the prior rate for the prior 2-year contract really started off at $250 with no increase for the second year of that contract, then we're looking at about a little over a 3 1/3% increase then off of that original contract by the time we get to the end of this 4th year, which I think is in my mind more reasonable and sustainable. If we really started off at $225, then that's a pretty substantial increase.
Marilyn, can you address that?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
The question is, so we're on the 3rd year of this contract and it has gone up $25 per van for the special education in district. Can you confirm if the first parts of the contract, if Lucini maintained the same
Yes.
charge?
Yeah,
I believe that's the case, but I wanted to confirm.
that is the case. But they did have 2 separate rates, like a shorter day rate and a longer day rate.
Yes, they would charge us for $225 if we had them for under 4 hours, and $250 if it was over 5 hours.
Okay, and was
What are-
the
But
bulk
they
of,
maintain that for the 2 years.
okay, and so was the bulk of our expense coming under the 225 rate or the 250 rate?
I think it was, I think it
The
was
250.
maybe like half. I think it might have been half and half.
It might have been slightly over, but it was, yeah.
Okay.
So effectively, it would have been like, what's in between that, 32 and a half?
Yeah.
I mean, 42, whatever.
237.50.
Right, 237, right. I couldn't do it in my head fast enough. Anyway, so it's still, so that does raise the percentage per year, certainly from the 3 1/3, but
And it's staying the
Three
same
and a
for
half.
an additional year as well.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
kind of
I think
averaging over
Jen
to
took
the end
that
of the
in, yeah.
contract.
Yeah, Jen averaged that through the 2 years, so it is high, I agree. I mean, and let's face it, Lucini, we certainly had a few challenges this year with the financial arrangements.
And just to refresh your memory, we had 2 bidders on this project, and the other was considerably more expensive to the district.
Okay.
I mean, that's certainly are extremely relevant because we do need transportation and we need to lock in soon, but.
Yeah, I think one of the key parts, and again, Lisa, I think hit on this, typically it's 2 runs. So it might be an hour in the morning, a couple hours in the morning, couple hours in the afternoon. But now that we're having the midday and we're having some students are going to stay till the end of the day, the typical end of the day. It's really 3 runs. So their
Yeah.
workers are going to be working much longer hours.
Well, we're not actually certain that will be the model. So, theoretically, you're right, but in a way, we don't have all the information that we might need to make that
Sorry,
decision.
Caroline.
Well,
ahead.
can I just say, we're also eliminating the midday. It's not a lot of money, but we are eliminating the midday kindergarten run for now.
So that's, okay. So that's a reduction of service for us.
A midday van, Marilyn?
No, the big bus.
For kindergarten students. So the way the half-day kindergarten is working, instead of them staying literally a half of a day, 5 days a week, they're going to participate 2.5 days a week. So that's how we're doing halftime. So they will not have those half-day runs on the 2 full days.
But for the next year of the contract, we will have that. So that's.
If we have
Very
students who are gonna have
stated.
half-day K, yeah.
David, is it safe to say that all 7 buses or all 7 vans would be doing 3 runs a day? How many are doing the 3rd run?
We really don't know yet because we have to get all the special education kids.
Yeah, so I just want to clarify what I said earlier. Those 3 runs are for the larger buses, for our general population. The high needs students, the vast majority of them, by design of this program, are going to be coming in the morning and leaving at the end of the day. The savings is in the big buses, because while those buses are $250, those vans are $250, every big bus is $80,000. So being able to get extra runs and not being charged by the run on those buses, we're going to be able to save a lot of money that we would otherwise have to pay if there were a different pay structure.
But they're different contracts though, right?
Yeah.
Yes, but they are negotiated the same way with the vendor, whereas other vendors, as I said, will charge you for the student or for the runs, or we do it for the vehicle for the day.
Mhm.
Yeah, so like VHS, they would charge you for the run. So it might depend on, there might be a run to Canton, but then there might be a run into Cambridge. Well, they charge you more money, obviously, to go to Cambridge than it would to be to go to Canton.
And the number of students, whether we have 4 students on a bus or an in-district van, or in typical times when we would have 7 or 50 on a large bus, it's the same price. Whereas with VHS, it's by the child. So if we have more students during the year that are potentially outplaced, we have unanticipated expenses of their transportation, whereas with this fixed contract, or it's a more fixed contract, because we can more reasonably estimate our number of vehicles that we need. Typically, this year is a little bit different, but typically we can estimate that better.
And Marilyn, can you remind us again what the total special ed transportation cost is, kind of ballpark? I just want to kind of figure out, what does a 10% increase turn into?
It's like $1.1 million.
That's That's the whole, you're talking about all of Lucini or special
Both.
education?
Both special ed, both VHS
I'm
and
sorry.
Lucini.
I should have said just Lucini special ed. Do we know what that is?
Oh, probably about 400,
Okay.
400,000.
So 10% on top of that's 40,000.
We also were, we also had understood when we were negotiating that transportation was, there was an effort at the state level for transportation to be included in circuit breaker. And now
Right.
that has since changed.
Right.
Was Lucini aware that this year they would not have to do that? Well, actually, we don't know that yet, but even if we were having to add extra runs next year, he's not, the expectation is that we would still just be paying for the number of vans. I mean, unless, obviously, if a van had to be added for
Yes.
whatever reason.
Yes,
but that
just
would be
like the big
different.
buses. If we need to add a vehicle, he will charge us additionally for that. But if we add runs, no, as long as it is, you know, not, what we can't do is say, the football team has a game at 6 p.m.
No, yeah, right,
It
of
was a
course
school
not.
day, so it's the same bus. We don't do that.
But you're saying there will be effectively 2 fewer runs for the half-day kindergarten kids per week this year.
Correct. Yes.
That could go back up to, who knows, next year, but it could go up to the 5-day-a-week.
Right,
you
but
know, the
we
extra run.
also have, so we also have sports that have been approved. And we don't know yet how many students are going to be providing their own transportation or are going to need buses. If we do not have appropriate social distancing, we will need additional buses. So there, you need to be aware that there might be a lot of fluctuation in both directions with transportation this year based on the social distancing requirements and COVID and everything else. So it's going to be quite mercurial, I think. Hopefully, we're trying to balance it in a way that keeps it as close to our anticipated payment, obviously, as possible, but there's going to be savings in a lot of areas. There's going to be expenses in a lot of areas. So we have 10 days less. That's already a savings.
Yeah.
But we may need twice as many buses to go to a track meet because they're not utilizing personal transportation and they have to take the bus, and we can only put 24 kids on a bus instead of 80. So we're hoping to keep it as neutral, cost neutral for this year as possible, but it is definitely going to have a lot of changes as we go through the year. We're gonna have to watch it very carefully.
Alicia, I feel like I may have misunderstood something completely. I thought sports was usually done on an as-needed basis, the sports transportation. It's not, it's part, I don't have the contract, so I can't see, but I didn't think
No,
that.
it is, but we have a traditional, when we do the RFP, we give them what a traditional expectation is for a year of sports. We tell them approximately how many runs they will do, approximately how many miles that will come out to.
Right.
So with our, we're going to have some abbreviated seasons. I think only one of the 3 sports you approved is the regular season. So we're going to have some abbreviated seasons. We're going to have less field trips. But then again, when we have something, we may need twice as many buses. So what I'm saying is, while it may go down and be savings in some areas, it may increase and be expenses in other areas. And we're just trying to keep it at cost neutral ultimately for the year.
Okay, I know that I seem to be a little slow on this, but
No,
my
I'm not
understanding
explaining
was-
it well, I guess. Just
No, it's definitely me. I'm just gonna take full credit for my slowness. I thought that if we had to, if we, for example, had to double the number of buses going to a soccer game because parents couldn't drive, then we'd have to pay extra for those extra buses.
correct.
So that's not the contract, that the 10% increase doesn't include, my understanding, doesn't include sports. We have a certain amount per run for sports that we will pay when we need those runs, correct?
Yes.
And I
There will
understand
also be
that's,
savings there because there will not be as many athletic contests per sport. So we're just trying to make it so that they even out.
but the 10% increase is
Caroline,
not really.
10% vans. The 10% is on the vans.
Oh, right,
That's
right,
what
okay.
we're voting on, the vans.
No, I understand, but
We're
I
not,
think,
we already did the other.
do we have to ever use special ed vans, those for sports? We do, don't we?
Well, I mean, he determines what he uses vehicles for. We don't really have any sports that are that small, but certainly if there were a need and they didn't need a large.
No, I didn't mean that. I meant we may have kids that require the vans that may be participating in on some level in our teams. No? We do, right? We do have children on IEPs that also participate.
Yeah, but just
sports.
because a student is on an IEP, they don't automatically qualify
Have
for
a van, right? No, I do know that. I just wondered if we ever used those vans for specific
I'm
circumstances.
not aware of any requirement for that ever
Okay.
so far.
We have had
Certainly,
situations.
if that were needed, we would use it, but that has not, since I've been here, we have not used it for that purpose.
If I remember correctly, we have had very few of these situations where we've actually used the van to pick up regular education students because there was some sort of a special situation going on. We had to get the students to school in an appropriate time. So instead of Bill charging us, again, going back to what Alicia said, where we have the van for the day, we pretty much can tell him, oh, can you do this run? Can you do that run? He might do, 3 runs, 4 runs in a day, depending on what the needs are. So we pretty much own the van for that day, which is a good thing.
And the driver?
Yeah, and the driver. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think what Lisa's trying to explain, and I agree with her, we're trying to look at the overall transportation costs because it's going to be like swings this year because, again, we're not going to play as many athletic contests. So we might save money in athletics, but then we might find out that we need 8 vans. So we're going to have an extra van, or we might find out, that we have to do an extra bus and we're going to have to scramble to figure that out. So it's really going to be a fluid situation. It's going to be really based on the number of athletic contests, the number of students that have to be transported, the number of runs. I mean, there's going to be a lot of factors that are going to come into play here.
Well, I apologize because I realized as I started diving down this rabbit hole, I did begin to conflate the two. So,
That's okay. No, that's
but
all right.
thank you, Nancy, for pointing that out. Thank you.
Oh, Jen, go ahead.
I think Michelle had her hand up first, actually. Sorry.
Okay,
That's all right.
Michelle?
Well, I'm tending to agree with Jen, and I understand, David and Alicia, what you're saying this year, that there's this back and forth, but this is a 2-year contract. So next year, we have to assume at this point that we're going to have full costs of everything next year, that we would be back to the old norm.
I sure hope so.
Right? So then we're not going to be saving on this bus to pay for this bus. We're going to have all the buses. So
Correct.
I'm kind of understanding what Jen is saying, that
But the cost for next year is already fixed. So that's
It's
a good
not
thing.
increasing it's
staying
not
the same.
increasing next year.
So I think, all right, so given all the information, the background that, a prior contract, we were probably starting off at an average of, say, $237 a day. So just kind of quick back of the envelope math, it looks like, from there to the end of this contract, we're averaging about a 5% per year annual increase.
That is typical.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that given, all the considerations and everything, I'm comfortable moving ahead with that, but I think we might need to kind of message that 5% increases in this, it might be typical. This is not sustainable forever and ever and ever. We can't continue to contract beyond the rate of our revenue increases indefinitely, right, in perpetuity. And I know we're getting into a much bigger issue here, right, where we do have some fixed costs that we can't negotiate, and they're higher than our, Prop 2.5 limit and all that stuff. And we're getting into town meeting stuff here, but
And just so you know too, there are, so for this industry and for this district that has been typical in terms of increases. And I understand what you're saying, that, you know, the rate of inflation, if it's 2.5%, we can't, how do we go over that?
Yeah.
But we're talking also in totality. There are some industries that have costs. For example, this one in terms of fuel and, and machinery and things like that, where there are others that have like wastewater treatment plant, which are almost negligible increases each year. So, you know, across the board, you need to try to keep it at a certain place, but there are certain industries that, based on what's happening in that industry in a particular year, it may be more or it may be less.
Yep.
So,
That's a good point. Yep.
And I just want to say, if and when we go remote, when or if, hopefully we stay in school, but we get a reduction on buses like we did from March to June, because we're not using them at all this year. And I'm only talking about this year, right?
that would, again, just like we negotiated it last year, we would have to negotiate it again. And I don't know, to
Okay,
be
so-
honest, the legislation that had to be put in place to allow that to happen in the first place, I don't know if
Right.
that sunsets or if that's, you know, if forever they're going to consider it okay to pay people that haven't rendered services. So that is something
Right.
we will need to revisit should we have to.
And
Should we
just
have to? Okay.
The vans are per
Jen-
day, per use per day. So if we weren't using the vans because we were in all remote,
We would negotiate that. Yep.
and I just one more question, and then I think I'll be done. Is it typical, or why do we contract this way, where we do a big jump and then hold it for a couple of years instead of saying we'll just increase 5% per year?
Well, Marilyn can speak to that. A lot of it has to do with where we are financially and where we expect we're going to be in the next year or two. Marilyn, do you want to speak to that more longitudinally
think-
in terms of past?
I think it's all districts do it that way. And I think it's because when you go out to bid, it's easier to measure bid to bid if they hold their prices the same for 3 years versus trying to actuarialize different prices for each year from different people that bid.
All right, thank you. That's helpful.
So Jen, do you want to save this till next week, or are you ready to vote?
I'm ready to vote today.
Okay. All right, I'm going to make a motion to accept Lucini in-district special education contract busing. Do I have a second?
Wiseman second.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Grants, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you. Thanks,
All right.
everybody. Okay,
Thanks, David.
number 6, approval of Hat Creek Outfit HVAC sales.
Yep, so this is a,
Dr.
another one of
Cabral.
those. Oh, do you want to
David.
talk, Felicia?
This
Sorry
is,
about that.
okay, no, that's
No.
okay. This is David,
ahead.
again, who will talk about this contract and answer any questions you may have. Go ahead, David.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so basically this is a company that we just started doing some business with. They're on the Massachusetts Higher Education Consortium bid list. We purchased HVAC supplies and equipment from this particular company. And so just looking for the committee's approval to enter into a requirements or an annual contract with them. Again, this is one that we usually do annual contracts in July, but this year with the pandemic and we're purchasing so many different pieces of material and equipment, we're using multiple vendors. So we were just looking to have this approval. Again, they're on the Mass Higher Education Consortium bid list. So we're actually getting the best bid pricing on their items that they sell. So that's pretty much about it. I'll entertain any questions that somebody may have.
Any questions? Do I have a motion to accept?
O'Neill, motion to accept.
Wiseman second.
All those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Grants, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Jen? Are you, Jen?
Sorry,
Did you
Star,
say
yes. Yes, I did. Yep.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
A lot of background noise
right.
here.
Okay, David, thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks a lot. If you guys have any other questions, just give me a call or send me an email. No problem.
Okay,
Have a great
thank
night.
you, David.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too. Next up, possible discussion and vote on school level plans, Dr. Cabral.
Okay, thank you. So this is a very important night for us. As you know, we've been working quite hard, and the principals have been working with school level teams now on getting their building plans ready. The building plans are direct results of our district plan that was accepted by the school committee and the state. They had to wait for that in order to do their building plans. They're making them consistent with the district plan, but there are certain details, of course, due to physical facilities, due to developmental age of the students they serve, and so forth, that have to be different for each school building. So you have been provided with the plans for each of the schools. Before we release them to the public, we do need the school committee to review them. You wanted to have the opportunity to discuss and potentially vote on all of these before they were released. So we're at that point. I will say that you did receive PDF versions. The public will be receiving live Google documents. And this is what has happened with the district plan, excuse me, with the district plan as well. The information is still fluid. The science is still being developed. And so there are many changes that are happening. As soon as last week, they actually changed the temperature, for example, at which a student would be assessed in our checklist, in our morning checklist that all students and staff check before they're coming into school. So details like that, which we consider to be very important, are constantly changing. What we don't want are multiple iterations of any of the plans out, so that someone may be making use of a dated plan that doesn't have the most up-to-date information in it. So just a couple of, that's one example. Another example is that some of the scheduling, we're still working on scheduling and scheduling teachers. So for the pre-K to 2 classes, for example, right now it says that lunch is from 12:30 to 1:40, and that there's travel time, there's dismissal time. That's not an accurate representation of what's happening during that time. For example, afternoon is also going to include things like small group work. It could be tutorial sessions, office hours, many different elements of programming that's happening. The school day is the school day for students, and it's also the school day for staff, which is why we're calling it synchronous. Even if they're not talking like this, it is still all planned time as if they were in school. And the same thing for the staff. So other things that are different in terms of equipment as it is received, we update that. Curriculum changes may be in there, and even schedules for upper schools. Chrissy, if you wanted to add any other examples, but I think just based on the examples we're going to share, the thing I really wanted to impress was that people should be checking these plans. They shouldn't just read it once. They should be checking them regularly, because there really is a lot of information that is changing, honestly, as we speak, and literally every day. And so the best way we've decided to keep it updated is to have a live Google Doc. So just so you know, even since you've gotten your building plans that you're reviewing this evening, there have been some tweaks and updates. But when families get them, they will get live Google documents that every time they open it, it will be the most refreshed version, and they can be certain that it is the most up-to-date version we have. Chrissy?
I just wanted to share that one example around the PK to 2 plans for the schedule for kindergarten through 2nd grade. We had listed in there 12:30 to 1:40 as lunch and dismissal. Well, obviously that's an extremely long time for lunch and dismissal. So what occurred through the conversation was these schedules are representative of all 3 schools. 2 of the schools, as you read in the plans, actually have staggered dismissals. 1 does not. So that's where that time frame is representative for all 3 schools. The other example is that Some services for students on IEPs might be utilized during that time. And it's also a time, developmentally, it was important for our students at home. 3 hours is enough time to be on a screen. So that also gives us time to have some interactions with our students that are there in person. They also might be eating lunch outside, so they need transition time to walk outside. They're also going to need time for all the students that are in person to wash their hands, to ensure that everything is sanitized. So that's where this time frame seems kind of large right now. We did add after speaking with staff, we added in, it's that time block in what you have there. It now says in-person small group, comma, lunch and dismissal. So that kind of, that allows us right now to have more flexibility within that time block as we get more comfortable with the schedule. So yes, day one, it may take us an hour and 10 minutes to do all of that. But day 6, it will be shortened and we will have more time for instruction during that block. So I just wanted to address that because it has been changed from the examples that you have.
Does anyone have any questions on the packets that you got or the PDFs that you got? Any questions? Go ahead, Caroline.
I suspect we all have a few, but I'm looking for a little more clarification, Chrissy, because I have to admit, when I first looked at the pre-K to 2 plans, I will use the word alarmed because in terms of time on learning, 4 days a week, it came to 3 hours and 40 minutes based on the schedule that we originally were given. Now, you said that you've added, Lynn very kindly printed the plans for me, and that was probably a couple of days ago. So because I, was having so much difficulty reading everything on my iPhone, but even, you've said there'll be a little more flexibility on that 12:30 to 1:40, that there could be some small group work. There
will be. It may not occur on day 1.
I think the first week, I think we've all kind of agreed that probably the first week with kids will be mostly just making connections. Between the kids and the teacher and and among everyone's classmates. So, my own expectations for the first couple of weeks are, pardon me?
Just to be clear, Caroline, the afternoon is time on learning.
Correct.
I know, I included that. I included the afternoon. When you add, essentially the 2 remote. No, I've included the 2 20-minute periods in the afternoon. I did not include the small group work that Chrissy just alluded to, because we don't know how long that will be or what, and I'm looking 2 weeks out. I'm not looking at day 1.
Right.
But even 2 weeks out, what we end up with, depending on, I don't know whether you're talking about, you can take 20 minutes or 30 minutes out of that lunch and dismissal, but that remains to be seen. But I'm just saying, if this were to be carried through to the official schedule 2 weeks out, we would only have 3 hours and 40 minutes each of the 4 days a week of time on learning.
No,
we're adding some time in.
Right, but no, we have met the time on learning. This is one of the things you have to keep in mind, Caroline, is that the students, they may have travel time, but they don't have recess. They don't have
40 minutes of a
special. Their specials are reduced. So we've definitely accounted.
Recess doesn't count as time on learning, but
no, I know. So what I'm saying is you can correlate that time with time that is in that hour. That's a half an hour during that day that we've never counted for time on learning.
Right. But we
plus the half-hour lunch. Yeah.
Plus a half-hour lunch.
No, I know we never counted that as time on learning.
Right.
But the time on learning doesn't it typically amount to more than 3 hours and 40 minutes a day requirement?
Yes, we in the school. So we had to in the school schedules, we had to it's really, we're providing a lot of information where typically in a class schedule, we don't provide this much information. For example, we need time for arrival and transition to the classroom because of the added precautions. Yes, that may take away from an ELA or a math lesson, but they're learning how to take care of themselves, and that could be considered health. We also, so that those minutes actually do account for, you know, in our 5, 6, 7, and 8-year-olds can account for time on learning as they're arriving. They're learning routines. They're learning very developmentally appropriate practice that is necessary in those primary grades.
They
And
also
then
have
we
a
also-
lot more
I'm sorry.
time on Wednesdays. I'm not sure if you've
Correct.
added.
They do, yeah, no, they do
Yeah.
have more time on Wednesdays. That's why I said it's
Yeah.
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. There's I forget it, I think it's an additional hour and 15 minutes on Wednesdays.
Right, and the other thing too is we had to
Theoretically.
account for why our students at home are logging in at 9:30. We are going to need all hands on deck. The facilitators will need to help with arrival. They won't be able to log the students on and be there to log the students on at 9:10. So that, because the students will be entering the building. So that's why it says, you know, that particular 20 minutes of arrival. Yes, as we go through the weeks, that time may be adjusted, and we may be telling families we're going to log on now at 9:15 rather than 9:30.
And so-
That's why these are going to be live documents, because this will be updated, and we
And
may
something
also
else-
be able to, we will be able to, as we go through, adjust and add another time slot, you know, 12:30 to 12:50 for small group in-person work. You know, that might be added to it, but right now we need to actually have the kids there, see how long things are going to take, because we can only predict right now.
So
Yeah,
our
I
original
agree.
iteration had shorter times for transition and for opening. And a lot of people expressed concern, why don't you have more time in there? It's going to take a while for them to practice. And they're right. And we did add that time. It will eventually go backwards, and we will have more time once we've hammered out the intake and the exits. But something to remember that maybe people, well, I know people don't see, that we see every year. For these elementary grades, when they're first coming to school, they spend a great deal of time learning what their cubby is, how to
Oh,
take
yeah,
off their
absolutely,
equipment and put it
absolutely.
in there. And we don't write that down anywhere for people to see how much of it is not time on learning. As Chrissy said, it is time on learning, but people don't typically see that listed somewhere as specifically as we have everything listed right now, because of the procedures that we have in place, because of our non-traditional opening. But we have gone through and we
Alicia,
definitely.
I think you're misunderstanding my question about the time and learning. I'm talking about the requirements from the state. I completely agree. Honestly, I think every minute of the day that students are in our schools are going to be learning minutes, because
Well,
it's such an unusual time.
Not exactly,
And-
we do subtract.
Well, I mean, even learning a new way to do movement outdoors, learning a new way to eat a snack, learning a new way to, I think all of those things are like really, particularly now, kind of critical learning experiences for kids. I'm talking about whether we're accountable to the state for our time on learning. So I probably should have framed this in terms of, are we going to, be scrutinized because of the schedule that effectively shows a reduced, and again, nobody's expecting kids to jump in the first day and adhere to this schedule or any schedule at all. I don't, for the first few weeks. I'm just talking about, kind of looking out. Will we be scrutinized? I guess that's the best way to frame it, for not having enough hours and minutes in technical time on learning. That's all I'm asking.
Because time on learning is not by the day, it is by the year. And
Okay.
we have gone through the year and we are confident we've met time on learning, and we will create better documents to demonstrate that to you.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions or comments on the reopening plans of each school? Go ahead,
Well-
Jackie. Jackie?
In the OA plan, There's section H, density and distance under classroom distancing. It says in phase 3, the vast majority of students will be separated by 6 feet. And then it says in rare instances where capacity exceeds the DESI accepted 3 feet increments will be met. And I was just wondering if at this point, if you know if there are any of those situations.
I'm not aware of any that would create close contact, which means within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. So they could potentially pass in a hallway, for example.
Sure. No. I think that, yeah,
Yep,
that's not
not
what I
aware
mean.
of any.
Sure.
No,
Okay. Thank you.
no problem.
Any other questions or comments on these opening plans, reopening plans? I wanted to just say, after looking through all of these, thank you to the principals, vice principals, secretaries, and anyone else involved in making these packets up. I know that you do them every year as a, you know, as a reopening, as opening school, you always have, but this year to add in all the face mask policies and the, I mean, all that, like Jackie was just talking about. And in each booklet, each packet, I like the continuity in each one, talking about synchronous learning and asynchronous, and just, there was a lot of continuity in all 6 packets. So I thank you, everybody that did a good job, because these are excellent.
Nancy?
Caroline?
Just echoing what you said, I thought all of the introductory statements were especially good. And I did want to read this very short one from Ann Weintraub, because I thought it was a really clear, unadorned statement, both of our kind of current reality and the goal. It just says, students are best served in the classroom, period. Nice, simple sentence there. While this plan provides the best that can be offered under the circumstances, the ultimate goal remains the safe return of all students to the classroom for in-person learning. I think that was a nice, very compact statement about both the current reality and our goal. And I just wanted to mention that and compliment Anne on providing such a nice little nugget for us. Thank you.
All right, so if there are no more, oh, Jackie, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I agree with your comments about these packets. They're very comprehensive. I think the administrators and their teams did a really good job trying to think of every situation that they're going to have to deal with in a year that nobody knows what we're going to have to deal with. So I just wanted to thank them all for that work.
And I do like the fact that these are going to be live Google Docs, because just like we've been since March, and the word pivot, we've been pivoting every direction. So I think that's awesome that they're going to be live Google Docs for families to keep updated on. All right, I'm going to make a motion to accept the school level plans for reopening.
Wiseman second.
All those in favor?
Michelle.
O'Neill, yes.
Grants, yes.
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you.
I do have to just
Okay.
add that our principals are very anxious to send these documents out. So we will definitely have them out to
Right.
families as soon as possible.
Okay. Next up, number 8, professional status recommendations. Dr. Cabral.
Thank you. So it is that time of year. We actually have very few, comparatively speaking, to our past years. So 3 years ago, we did not add many staff, evidently. We have I should refresh the memories of people who are not on the school committee or perhaps educators. Professional status is a milestone for educators. After 3 complete years of service, and with the recommendation of the principal and superintendent, professional employees in the teachers unit are offered professional status. It is symbolically, it is sort of welcoming them to the permanent family, if you will, of Easton Public Schools. It means that they have had, they have successfully been mentored by a trained professional mentor in the district, and that they are considered to be a professional at this point and do not need further mentoring, and are actually qualified to mentor others at that point. They are also it also changes their status in terms of contractual rights and benefits. And so it is quite significant for an educator. And typically we have a wonderful ceremony here in Easton where we have the recipients of professional teacher status, or PTS, we refer to it here, where they invite their family and friends and their colleagues come, and we do celebrate this achievement for them in our small way, but it is actually much more than most districts do. I'm not sure where that's going to happen this year or how we're going to do that, but we still want to make sure that we award the professional status where it has been earned. For this time around, we have at the Richardson Olmsted School, Jennifer Costa is the adjustment counselor there. She has been recommended. At Easton Middle School, Abby Boyd, guidance counselor, Heather Conley, social studies teacher, and Heather Duquette, adjustment counselor, have been recommended. And at Oliver Ames High School, Amanda Schleicher, math teacher, has been recommended for professional teacher status. So those are the recommendations for this year. No word yet on what we will do in terms of celebrating that, but we did want to bring those names to your attention.
Thank you very, very much, and congratulations to those 5 teachers. Thank you. Okay, next up is reopening update. Dr. Cabral.
Okay, so we have begun our professional development, or we are full into phase 2 at this point in the district. Our professional staff has been engaged. They had one introductory day, and then it's followed by 10 professional development days where they have planning and collaboration time, but there's also a great deal of professional development in terms of technology, strategies for teaching both hybrid and remote, cleaning protocols, safety protocols for COVID, how to identify symptomatic students, for example, all the way to how to determine if a mask meets the guidelines and is safe or needs to be replaced with a surgical mask, things like that. There are also, we had several offerings on major area of focus in this district, which is race equity. And so we have we have upcoming in this next week, we have professional development opportunities in that area, as well as safety, technology, collaboration, and race equity.
Social emotional.
SEL.
Yeah, the
So-
SEL, the
social,
SEL, of course. And we have social emotional offerings as well. Not just our typical social emotional offerings, but being cognizant of the fact that we have students that have been in a sustained state of trauma for 6 going on 7 months now. And we are trying to help people have a different understanding of indicators, things they should look for, behaviors, attitudes, physical demeanors, things like that, that would signal that more attention is needed for a particular child. And so that is a great deal of professional development in 10 days. It's a bit of a boot camp. We've had great sessions, and the staff has been actively engaged. We have many stories of teachers going into their classrooms. They're actually utilizing some of the technology for the first time in terms of the hybrid model, both in person and online. We've heard very positive feedback about that. So we are encouraged about that for sure. We're making tweaks whenever you have something different, like people in the building, we're making tweaks to things. We have different eyes looking at things, you know, maybe that shouldn't be a one-way hallway, maybe this would be better, you know, simple things like that. And all of that is in preparation, of course, for welcoming the students on September 17th. So we are well on our way. We are on schedule. Again, encouraged by the feedback we've gotten from people who have been in their classrooms and have started using the equipment. I will tell you a couple of things that have come up. One is people may be aware, this is federal news, so people may be aware from seeing this in the media, that the federal government has put out the opportunity for meal waivers. So if you remember in the spring, we were doing the grab and go lunches, we were not charging for those. Those were free of charge. It was a federal program to be sure that anyone who was in poverty or had any sort of financial sensitivity would be able to feed their children appropriately. So they have allocated funds to continue that at least until the end of this calendar year. Poverty advocates are pushing to have that extend for the school year. As of now, it is just until December. You do need to apply for that, however, so we have applied for that and we're waiting for confirmation. If we are accepted into that program, it would mean that we would not be collecting money for breakfast and lunch. Instead, we would be collecting interest and then distributing breakfast and lunch to any student that needed or wanted it, which of course, you know, as a basic human need, we feel is critical to our students' success. We speak to our staff, you can't get to Bloom's unless you get through Maslow. So we have to satisfy our basic human needs before we can get to our cognitive needs. And so we are thrilled about the news, but not yet certain if we have been accepted into the program. As soon as we know about that, we'll let you know. And of course, that will make a big difference in terms of parents purchasing breakfast, purchasing lunch, may make a difference in if they want to have access to breakfast and lunch. And so we will get that information out to you as soon as we receive it. So just because a federal stimulus in that area has been approved, it doesn't mean every district gets it. So we are still awaiting the application information. The other thing I would like to talk about is we are still working on our Start-Stop protocol, not because, again, we don't have one, but because it is very complex. I met again with the Board of Health today. We're working in perfect collaboration. The fact of the matter is the system, even that has been disseminated by the governor, has some flaws in it that most people may not be aware of. I understand that the intention is to provide a quick and easy graphic for people. It's very easy to see white, green, yellow, red. Unfortunately, when you dig deeper into the data, which we do anyway, but we've been encouraged to do by both the state and the Department of Education, there are many different factors that influence what happens or where that data comes from that determines choices that we make. So, for example, there were a lot of questions in the past week about why Easton went from green to yellow. Some of that information we were not able to discuss. Some of that information we don't have, but the Department of Health has, or the Board of Health has, and they aren't able to discuss with us. But I'll give you examples of what that could mean as a possibility. If we are thinking about the safety of our children and their exposure, there could, we have a university in town, we have some assisted living, we have nursing homes, and they're relatively contained. These areas are contained, purposefully contained, for the protection of the residents and those living there, but also for contact tracing purposes. It is very possible that in a town of Easton's size, an uptick of 10 cases could be certainly considered a spike, for example. But if those 10 cases are in one assisted living facility where there haven't been visitors to these particular patients, there hasn't been contamination out in the town, and there's no evidence that there has been exposure in any way. Those residents have not left this facility. There is no intention of them leaving the facility. They have not had a visitor that's gone into the town. That is viewed very differently than if you had 10 parents who were at a birthday party of a student in town, for example. That would be much more concerning. There are incidents in other cities or towns, for example, where an entire family was at a function and the family members, for example, were all exposed and are quarantined or have been positive, but have not integrated with others outside of their family. Those things matter very much, actually. And that's why the contact tracing is really the most important part. I did explain at our last meeting that we are actively working with the Board of Health to get an intern on board who will be facilitating the contact tracing, and will be working very closely with both the Board of Health and the school department in doing the contact tracing. First, so that it's consistent. Second, so that it's timely. But third, that it's accurate. They will have information, and the Board of Health certainly will have more information than, as I said, even we have. And in some cases, we cannot give out information. What I can say is, without question, if a student is tested positive for COVID, every person that they have been in close contact with for the last 48 hours will be contacted. So that is the metric we're using. We go back to a 48-hour cutoff period of the onset of symptoms. We contact anyone who was within 6 feet of that student for 15 minutes or more, even if they had, I don't care how much protective equipment on, doesn't matter. Mask, shield, gloves, gown, doesn't matter. And those people will be contacted. However, because there's someone in a building who's positive, it doesn't necessarily mean they were in contact with anyone. For example, there could be a counselor who has a particularly heavy load of meetings at the beginning of the year and didn't actually have any students in their office and didn't actually go out into the school. Yes, that's a positive case, but again, that's very different than a teacher who had students sitting in front of them. So what I'm trying to express is that there really isn't a way we can say if there's one case, if there's 5 cases, we really have to look at each case, because we want to be responsible and we want to make sure that the information we provide is accurate. And we want to make sure that we do it in a timely manner as well, because none of us wants any sort of an outbreak. And so we are very cognizant of that. And that time is of the essence. And that is why we have this person coming on board who's going to be trained specifically in doing this work and is going to help us. So I know people are looking for particular numbers and they're relying on things like this red, yellow, green, but it doesn't always mean anything really for the school district. Sometimes it may mean nothing for the school district. Sometimes it may be extremely impactful. Please know that we are well aware of all of the metrics that others are looking at, and we actually have more information than the general public, again, because the Board of Health has access to something called the MAVEN system, which keeps track in the entire Commonwealth of anyone in the state that tests positive immediately. Well, there are actually flaws with the MAVEN system as well in terms of when they are put into the system, but it's much more timely than any other system in the entire Commonwealth. And so that information would come to us really simultaneously with somebody even telling us that their doctor told them they had COVID. So that is the very best information that we have right now. We are trying to basically capture what I just took 10 minutes to explain to you in a document. And that's sort of what we're dealing with, is trying to illustrate that in a way that you can sort of put down on paper. And we're listing all the metrics we're using. We have a glossary that we feel is extremely important to this, because people are having there's a difference between quarantine and isolation, for example. There's a difference between self-isolation and the doctor mandated, and there's difference between a suspected case and a positive case, and symptomatic and asymptomatic. So we have a very comprehensive glossary that's in there as well. We have examples of all the template documents that would be sent home with anyone that's contacted because their child or has suspected exposure, with detailed directions of what they should then do, who they should contact, how they should get more information. So that is all coming. It's not that we aren't working on that or that we don't know what that information is going to be. It's just that we are trying to put that in a shareable document that somehow captures what I just labored to explain to you through examples. But we are working on it again. We were working on it again today, and we're continuing to work on that, and everyone will have that. But it's not something the school department is coming up with on their own. We're using Mass Department of Public Health guidance, CDC, Board of Health, and we're all doing it together.
All right. Anything else, Dr. Cabral, on that?
No, unless Chrissy wants to add anything
On
about
reopening?
we're right on schedule right now.
Okay, Jackie?
Sure. So obviously we passed our face covering policy a couple of meetings ago. And a lot of times with these policies, we then have guidelines that kind of put in some more specifics. The policy is meant to be a broader overall policy that will stand for a while, whereas the guidelines can be tweaked as needed. So I just drafted up based on information from CDC, World Health, and our reopening packets that came from the different schools, some face covering guidelines. So I thought we could go through them, see what you all thought, if there's things you want to change, if you think it's a good idea to have these or not. So that's it. Do you want to go through it? How do you want to?
Sure, yes.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that, going through Jackie's face covering guideline document? Do you happen to have one, Dr. Cabral and Chrissy, do you have this?
Yes.
Okay, good.
We've
All
reviewed.
right.
Yep.
So Jackie, on the first page, number 4B,
Yep.
talking about neck gaiters, and we got information from Bill Matthews
Right.
this week that soccer players, they found that this was a good face covering for soccer. So I don't, do we need to? Go ahead.
Can I maybe elaborate on that? I think
Yeah.
soccer is an example, but I
Sure.
think there are many. I was talking to, for example, to Department Chair Jeff Benson today about even outdoor instrument playing. If you think about the actual activity, there are, imagine playing any sport, not just soccer, or holding an instrument and, taking it down, putting it up. The guidelines for soccer were illustrated because, for example, it is saying that when you have 6 or more feet between you, that the players can take the mask down. And then when they're approaching each other, they have to put the mask up. To my understanding, soccer is going to look very different. That's one example of a sport that's going to look extremely different this year. But regardless, if you just think of the physical action of up and down, and when you've got ear loops on, if they drop a mask, if they're not able to, the idea is you want them to be able to cover up appropriately and quickly. There's also, of course, been more research done on the actual gaiters and on the Duke University initial study. So it's just, I don't know how. At the very least, I think it's important to keep in mind that there are some activities for which a gaiter, an appropriate 2-ply, an appropriate fabric, and so forth, obviously well-fitting, all the items that are clearly listed in your guidelines, that they would be not only effective, but potentially safer in terms of actually getting it on the child's face or being able to catch breath if they were far away from one another. But I'm not sure if you want to also consider that for in the school. Again, one of the things that the parents are doing, one of the things that the nurses have done, they have a presentation where, part of the beginning of the school year are teachers and their students assessing the masks or the face coverings, and are they appropriate or not. So there will be specific eyes on every single child's mask. And so we will see if a child's wearing 1-ply, or if it's loose fitting, or if they have a bandana, for example. You have to remember classes are going to have 8 to 12 kids in it. So it's not as though it's a huge crowd that they can't readily and very easily see what they're wearing. So, I would suggest that appropriate gaiters are able to be worn, but of course will follow the direction of the committee.
Okay. And then Jackie, on the second page.
I'm sorry, Nancy, but I think
Nancy.
there's
Seven.
questions or comments. Jen and Caroline have their hands up.
Jen,
Jen, go ahead.
Jen, go ahead.
I wanted to echo Dr. Cabral's thoughts. I had looked more into the Gator issue over the past couple of weeks after hearing from parents and understanding the comments. I know there was that big study that made a big splash in the media that stated that, you know, a headline was that Gators can be worse than having no mask on at all, and there was an opportunity for the designers of that study to clarify. And reading in the subsequent articles that, you know, they actually were testing methodologies for how to test masks. They were not testing the efficacy of specific types of masks. They happened to have a Gator on hand that happened to be one layer of polyester or something. And they did not intend to imply from the results that they were testing the differences between a 2-ply cotton mask versus a Gator versus whatever. It just that those are part of the examples that they used in terms of explaining testing methodology that could be used by manufacturers and mask producers as a way of measuring. So with that follow-up information, I think unless the nurses have said otherwise, and I don't think the documentation that we got a week or two ago indicated that the nurses specifically called out net Gators, I would support allowing them and not calling them out as a separate item, again, as long as they are multiple layers and meet the other face covering protocols. So just wanted to share that. Let's see what everybody else thinks.
Caroline,
Jen, I basically never disagree with you, so this might be a first time occasion. I mean, I've also kind of, dug a little deeper. I know, Leisha, you sent us at Bill Matthews' request the article from the New York Times. I didn't find it overly convincing, did a little bit more research. I think the jury's still out on this. I would absolutely support appropriate Gators, 2-ply cotton. I don't think it's that easy to tell what kind of material a mask is made out of because polyester can pretty much mimic anything. But I would support that for outside activities where kids are, distanced and can take them on and off. I do agree with the idea that for a sport or possibly even marching band or something like that, the ease of taking the, moving the mask up and down is a compelling point, and certainly would make participating in those activities easier. I would be opposed to a student being allowed to wear a Gator all day long, because I think it's that very ease of popping them up and down that would lead more students, particularly teens, quite frankly, to just every time they started to encounter a friend and maybe their voice was a little muffled or whatever, to say, oh, I can just, down and up again. I think that making it a little bit more challenging to remove a mask will actually keep masks on more students more consistently. So I would suggest that we allow athletes and maybe music, kids participating in music, preferably outdoors, to have Gators that they would bring with them for those activities. But I would be pretty strongly opposed, based on my own research and based on my concern about behaviors around Gators. I would be strongly opposed, I realize I'm only one vote, to having them be just a universal mask, accepted universally as masks in school.
Sorry, Jen. I do appreciate the support of the sports and after school activities. I realize that I don't need to convince you on that at this point, Caroline, but I just did want to add an additional point of complexity that if we did, for example, not allow Gators in those activities, we do have visiting teams, we do go to other fields. It would be very complicated to have to tell every visiting team that they wouldn't be able to wear Gators when they compete against us. And so and then it would be sort of fruitless for them to have them and we don't. So I realize you expressed support of that. And so I thank you for that, but I did also just want to add that other point. So thank you for
I think it's-
supporting
it's a
that
good
aspect
point.
of it anyway.
It would be very difficult to do that too, to you know, essentially require another school district to have restrictions on their own mask policy or whatever. So I don't know, what does everybody else think about the idea of using gators for sports and potentially music activities outdoors? But I mean, I know that it's a slightly additional burden for families of kids who are playing sports to have to get a gator and another mask, but we're asking everyone to bring in a spare mask anyway. So maybe they could just pop a gator in that plastic Ziploc bag as well. I don't know.
Michelle?
I'm actually in support of gators in general. And to Caroline's point, and just maybe because I've been in schools, it's just as easy to grab your mask and pull it down and up and not take it off your ears as it is to do a gator. Just grab it, hold it, talk, like to your point about they would just be pulling it to say hi to their friends. I honestly think a mask is just as easy to do that. You just pull it
That
off,
may be
pull it
true,
down,
but
and
the
snap it back.
the masks slip off the nose very easily too. I mean, I see tons of people, well, I can't say tons, I'm not out very much, but of course I do see people on television. But I do see a lot of, you know, even these large groups that you see, the gators have slipped down over the nose very easily. I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just something that happens. You know, the ear loops and the ties and so on, I think do make the masks more secure. And of course, anything with a nose, you know, an additional option of kind of making it more secure around the nose, that can't really be done with gators for the most part. I mean, maybe they do have gators with those insertions where you can kind of pinch them around your nose, but I'm not aware of that. I just really want people to have their masks securely on when they're inside the buildings, and to kind of do everything we can to ensure that that happens. I absolutely support the idea, as I said, of gators for sports activities and any outdoor activities where kids are already hopefully being distanced to the degree possible within the correct parameters of that particular sport. But I just feel like this is just making, I mean, again, I'm just one vote, and you know what? I'm used to being the outlier, so I'll defer to everyone else, obviously's opinion, or I'll have to at some point, perhaps.
Are there any other comments on this portion? So do we want to vote on, oh, go ahead, Jackie.
No, I was just going to say that that was what Caroline said was my one concern as well, that, and again, I haven't been in a school, so Michelle, you know, has a better picture of what's been going on than I certainly do. I was concerned that with a gator, it would be a lot easier just to kind of slip it down, put it up, slip it down, put it up, and maybe in not so appropriate time slipping it down. And that was my concern with gators. I do support wearing them for, I didn't even think of the outside music activities, but yeah, I think that makes sense as well.
Okay, any other comments or, okay, do we want to just
We do have one comment
make
about
a
this in the
decision?
chat.
Go ahead, Michelle, Chrissy, go ahead.
Valerie Frank, 158 Elm. One test many people use to determine if a mask is okay is a simple test. If you blow through it, could you blow out a candle held close by? Not suggesting pyromania at school, but basically, if you blow through the mask and you can feel the air come through, the mask isn't good enough. Many gators do not pass this test. Gators are also hard to talk with since they are literally stuck to your mouth.
Well, I do think that's one reason why kids especially take them down and up so often, is they want to be able to talk to their friends. And so you're right, they are hard to talk through. Actually, my grandson mentioned that, so who plays soccer. So anyway.
I think my opinion is at least now for the initial, we could always change it later, but I think for the initial in school, no gators, after school for the outdoor activities, gators. That's just my feeling. Because then if it's not gators, is it going to be something else that will, come into play that we haven't even seen yet. So I think if we stick with what Jackie has put down here, the regular 2-ply cot, whatever, and kind of keeping with that, it's up. I mean, we'll, and that was what I was going to say. Do we want to just accept each one as we go along, each section? Or do it at the end? Jen?
I just want to make sure, so, and I know there were a couple of other outstanding questions in here that Jackie had put in her notes that we should address before we move to vote on anything, but just want to make sure
Okay,
back
well,
to the back
that was
to
my
the Gator
question.
question.
Go ahead.
I do one more comment on that. So I know that we do have language in here that would allow for alternatives to be discussed on a case-by-case basis with the building principal in terms of students with disabilities and sensory sensitivities and other issues. So I could imagine, and again, I heard, specifically from more than one special education parent that they have invested in high quality, double layered gaiters with filters and ear loops. And those are most comfortable for their little ones, and their kids use them and they use them successfully. So I just want to make sure that in including the net gaiter, as a, prohibited, that doesn't prohibit it from an accommodation on a case-by-case basis for a special ed student. Do we agree? Would we agree with that?
It wouldn't. It
Okay.
wouldn't, Jen, because it does say on a case-by-case basis with the building principal in consultation with the child's medical provider. Obviously, if the child's medical provider, I mean, you mentioned the gaiter with ear loops. I mean, I think, that does create a more secure mask to begin with, but I think that all of the kids that have some sort of sensory issue or some other challenge, those decisions will be made in consultation with the principal, with the involvement of the medical provider. So I can't imagine that would limit those kids' use of gaiters if they're, most appropriate for those youngsters.
Okay.
I don't think that's our intent at all. But thank you for bringing that up, because I do think it's important to always keep those children in mind that may have additional challenges that we don't automatically, have an awareness of. So
Yeah, and there can be a lot of trial and error to find something that works for a child, and we want to be as flexible as possible with using something that's reasonable. And okay.
But you raised another important point, which was Jackie. Nancy, could I just say, first of all, so many thanks to Jackie. I mean, what a wonderful job she did pulling out all of the key issues around masks. I mean, I thought this was just fantastic. And, but we do have that question in there. Do we have these in terms of those specialized shields? Is there a way, Leisha, do you know that we can, I know that there are a lot of things that are on back order, or there's a, supply chain issue, but could we look into maybe getting some of those kinds of shields? Because I would think, particularly for some of the students we were just discussing, that would be safer both for others and for them, and would maybe allow them to participate, in a more active way with classmates or with their teacher, because it would be, as I said, safer for others as well. So is there a way we can look into that?
So we do have several different kinds of masks. We have clear front masks, we have cloth masks, and we have the disposable surgical masks. We also have shields that can be put over different kinds of masks. We do not have the close fitting face shield as described in that policy. Those tend to be those tend to require appropriate fit, because they are, they're not as manipulable or malleable as cotton, for example. So our intention in that case was to order them on an as needed basis, because it may need to be specific to a particular child. So we don't have a stock of those, and we're not waiting for them. We haven't ordered them and they're on back order or anything like that. We have those other alternatives for now. And as I said, we can do something different if you choose, but it was our intention to do that more on a case needed, because it is very different for someone who is you know, a first grader than an eighth grader, for example, when you're talking about something that is rigid, that is more fitted to the face.
That makes sense. I think those are usually customized. Oops.
Okay, and the other thing, I wasn't really looking for a vote on this guideline. What I'm trying to get is a sense of which direction so that we can make a final judgment maybe next week on this face covering guidelines that, as Caroline said, Jackie did a fabulous job on. So we might as well go to the last page, English language learners. If a clear mask is not available or appropriate, use a face shield that covers the entire face, wraps around the sides of the face and extends below the chin. So that was what we were just talking about. That's the same thing. So we don't have those right now, but that could be a case by case basis. And maybe some families might want to provide one for their child if they feel that that's what they want or need. I don't know.
And I could tweak the language just to say something like, you know, you can consider using this in consultation with whomever. I didn't know if there were any other suggestions of types of masks that would be appropriate for these groups that I just didn't know about and maybe should put in this, or.
Not from our end that we're aware of.
Okay. Okay.
So I would leave that in there, but maybe put, you know, at the parents' discretion, or the school cannot provide that right now, but maybe we can later on, but maybe the parents would want to do something like that. And then as far as neck gaiters, if you want to, I don't know what, that's what I'm saying. Do we want to, we all chimed in on it. So I don't know what you want to write as far as what's allowed in school. So there were two, I believe, 2 in favor and 3, I don't know, whatever. So we're not voting.
Are you actually voting on this tonight? Because I don't know if the nurses have reviewed it. Okay.
No,
but
Right, and it's not a voting item on the agenda, so.
I used the word vote in the wrong way earlier because I was just trying to get a sense of which way we wanted to go. Okay, any other Caroline, go ahead.
As usual. So I do think the sooner we, you know, do approve guidelines, the better, because we do need to make all of these things clear to families. But I did want to thank Valerie Frank for the blowing through the mask to put out a candle suggestion. I actually tried that with my mask and I could not put out the candle, but I could see light through it, which was the other test that was recommended by the CDC. And I was very disappointed to find that the masks I had been wearing for months, I could see light through very easily. So now I'm adding a coffee filter and I can't see any light through them, but it's very uncomfortable. But so I'm wondering though, should we put some information about how to ensure that the mask in fact is blocking those aerosols? I mean, one way would be to actually offer those 2 tests to people in terms of kind of vetting the masks that they're sending in with their children. I don't know, you know, maybe just too much information, but I'm just wondering if we could put something in the guidelines about that as well. I mean, obviously we do want the nurses to review this document and, you know, would welcome any additional suggestions they may have, but what do you think? Should we put in something about kind of testing the masks? Because there are about, seems like 10,000 companies advertising masks now. So it's really hard to know which ones may in fact be, you know, trustworthy and which ones may be a little iffier.
Caroline, who are you suggesting is going to test the masks?
No, the parent, it's just a way that parents, if they wish, can test the mask.
I thought you were
themselves.
suggesting it was happening in school. Oh my God.
I'm sorry. Oh my goodness, Michelle, I'm sorry if I implied that.
No, I might have misunderstood.
No, I want Leisha to test every single, let's see, how many would we have? Well, 2 masks for every child. So about 7,200 masks, Leisha, you have time for that? No, I was just saying as a guideline for the parents, but I don't know that it belongs in this document. I'm just saying that I do think it's useful information because sometimes people really don't know, you know, they're buying the mask wherever, they're buying it from, or a friend sends them a mask, and do they really know whether it's, you know, properly filtered and all of those, you know.
I can't
Are there-
remember. The nurses put together a one-page kind of like mask etiquette sheet. But I can't think off the top of my head. It might have said something about, I don't know if it said anything about that in it or not. I don't know if anyone remembers.
Is theirs a Google Doc also? I don't remember. I know I saw just
It was a link
in the opening plans.
yeah,
I
in
mean,
the
in
opening plan.
Alicia's newsletter,
Yeah.
right? The newsletter, right?
It
I
was
don't
in the
remember
opening
either.
plan. It was in the opening plans as well, a link in the opening
Okay.
plans.
I mean, it could always be. I just think
Mhm.
it's useful information for parents who may. I mean, I didn't know honestly how to test the mask. I thought I was doing fine because I had 2-ply cotton. But it turned out it was apparently thin enough that I could see light really very clearly through it. So, I don't know. Whatever people think.
We have
All
another
right,
question about the masks.
Go ahead. ahead.
From Ken Flanagan. Oh, there's no address. Ken, if you could type in your address, then I can read your question, please.
Um,
Oh, wait,
Okay.
here we go.
and anything else besides Ken's question, anything else from
Yeah,
the school committee on? Okay, go ahead.
sorry. Not
Any
from the
other
school committee.
questions?
Another question. Lauren Loomis, 4 Abbey Road. Can you please confirm if mask lanyards can be used? They are really helpful, especially for the younger kids, so their masks don't get lost, misplaced, soiled, or contaminated during mask breaks.
I can't answer that.
I don't.
Dr. Cabral?
We're fine with them. We are particularly fond of breakaway versions so that if the mask were to get caught or pulled in some way, that it can break away. There are some that have either a Velcro attachment or a magnetic attachment. That is something that I would recommend, just so that if as I said, if the mask were to get caught in something or caught on somebody else's backpack and it's pulled, it doesn't pull the child's neck.
Maybe we can add that to the guidelines. Their lanyards with their IDs have to be breakaway too, I think.
Right.
I'm not sure the nurses. I'm not sure what the nurses think of that as well, so.
Well, this whole thing is going to be reviewed by the nurses.
Okay.
Right. And did you get that question back again from Ken or not?
Yes, but his address is in Mansfield, so I would need your permission to ask a question from somebody out of town.
Is he a
He's a
staff
school
member?
employee, so
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay, so Ken Flanagan, 1 Old Colony Road, Mansfield. Do these face mask guidelines, specifically the use of gaiters, apply to staff as well?
That's for you guys.
I would say yes.
Yeah, I would. This is to accompany our face covering policy.
Yeah, the
so-
policy covers everybody. Everybody who enters the building
Right.
it covers, including
I would
parents
say
who,
Yes.
yes.
Ken, thanks for your question. Yes. All right, Michelle.
My question actually isn't about the face mask.
I know, we're moving from mass to you. Go ahead.
Well, it had to do with the reopening. So I've had a lot of questions about this desk washing.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if we can get some clarification. So that it's a multiple part question.
Okay.
So I know like at the high school, they're half-hour periods. I honestly, off the top of my head, I'm not remembering the middle school or the younger grades. Who's doing, which of the grades is doing the desk washing? It's particularly like in the high school, we have a half-hour period. If you're washing desks, how much loss of time on learning are we doing with desk washing? Is that happening once during the period? Is that happening twice during the period? There's a concern about sharing water. Are the kids wearing gloves? So if you can just kind of, somebody clarify all that, what's
Yep.
happening.
Sure.
Thank you.
No problem. So I'm just writing it down so I make sure I answer all of the parts of the multi-part question. So yes, so One of the things, and I'm going to take a balcony view before I answer specifically, if that's okay. One of the things I want to remind people when we have questions about things like time on learning and about, you know, how much time is going to be spent on certain things, we are very, very, very aware of time on learning, and we are very aware of how to meet time on learning, and it happens throughout a school year. It is always more dense in the school year than it is when we are what we call front-loading information. There is no expectation at this moment that this September is going to look like any September since 1918, frankly. We have to understand that at this point, some things are more important. One of them is keeping our students safe and our staff safe. The next is making sure that they feel comfortable, that we are assessing them socially, emotionally, and then we are going to get way more out of what we are teaching our students. So I know nobody has suggested anything different, but I just want to make sure that we're aware that people understand that the first few weeks of school is going to center around a lot of the things that the staff's learning right now. New cleaning protocols, self-care, and socially conscious decision-making that keeps ourselves and others safe in our environment. The social emotional aspect and coping strategies and coping skills. These are things that, you know, not necessarily the cleaning desks, but these are things, social, emotional, and so forth, that happen at different points in the year that we're front loading purposefully this year because of the needs that we see in students coming in. So I'm telling you in full disclosure, I have no problem explaining this to the commissioner as well, that we are front loading information that he may or may not consider time on learning. We are confident we will get our time in learning throughout the school year, but we feel very strongly that this is much more important. And so we are going to do this until we're confident that there isn't a threat we need to be worried about. In terms of how much time it will take and who will do it, we literally have water bottles, spray bottles, that are going to be, we're not using buckets, we're using spray bottles with soapy water that's pre-prepared by the custodial staff. Staff members, it's really a very quick exercise to walk up and down aisles and spray seats and desks as they go along, and the student simply wipes it off with a paper towel. We are using gentle, non-toxic dish detergent, food grade. And again, just to repeat, it is not for a lack of disinfectant. It is purposefully chosen because of the lipid envelope of the COVID virus and the fact that the soap, particularly degreasers, cut the lipid barrier, and by essence of not having that envelope anymore, kills the virus. So it is not a disinfectant, but eliminating the lipid envelope destroys the COVID. So it is extremely effective, and it is the least concerning in terms of chemicals for students. They will not be dipping their hands in buckets. They will not be sharing water. They will be using clean, high quality paper towels, not the brown things that are in schools a lot. They are absorbent. They will be discarded immediately. Hand sanitizer is available for every single child in every single classroom and throughout the buildings in multiple places. We have gloves for anybody that chooses to wear them. In terms of the disinfecting, there are wipes available. What we are recommending in terms of being most efficient with our time is that literally 30 to 45 seconds before the end of a period, a teacher squirts down rows, students wipe them off, they leave. When a student comes into a classroom, particularly grades 6 and up, they have wipes at their disposal where they can then disinfect the chair and the table. The younger students, that is at a parent's discretion if they want them to use those wipes. I think it is extremely important to remember that the students are cleaning their desks at the elementary levels when they come in, before and after they eat, and whenever necessary if they become soiled, but they're not sharing desks with other students. So we don't have as much of a concern of using the wipes in between. We don't want them to be using wipes too much. If a parent feels differently, they can certainly let us know, and their child can use a wipe to clean their surface. It's not a problem. Same thing at the high school and middle school. If they don't want their child using a wipe, they don't have to. So we really feel as though we have this covered very well. We have researched it quite extensively, and we have thought about many of the factors that parents have as concerns as well. But we very much appreciate the that they're asking these questions, and that we have the opportunity to explain these things so that people know. You know, it's one thing if we're aware of it, but if people don't know that we're doing that, it's useless information. So we do appreciate the opportunity of being able to explain that again. So thank you.
Michelle, did that answer all of your
Every part of
questions?
the question, but did I forget any part of that?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Caroline?
Sorry, Nancy. You know, Leisha, thank you for saying that, because you just triggered a thought, and I apologize. I forgot to mention on the mask discussion that a friend who sent me a document about masks, one of the things that was included was to state that disinfectants should never be sprayed on masks because they can actually cause respiratory problems.
Sure.
And I guess you know, people do sometimes think, oh, I'll just quickly disinfect the mask and reuse it, but really masks, particularly cloth masks, obviously have to be washed, and other masks that are disposable should just be disposed of and not reused. So I think we might want to put something in there about never spraying disinfectants on masks, because apparently that is something that people sometimes do.
Interesting point.
Sorry, I should have mentioned that under the mask policy discussion, sorry.
That's fine. It's all in the reopening part, so that's fine. Are there any other questions or comments on reopening? Any other questions or comments on reopening? Okay. And I believe, well, we're meeting next Thursday, which is the 10th, and then the 17th is the first day for students. So maybe we'll have even more to discuss next week, or maybe everything will be in place. So that'll be good. All right, Chrissy, public comment.
Sure, I have 3 questions or statements as of this moment. The first is from Danelle Eaton, 7 Kilseth Road. Is there an app being used for the morning wellness checklist parents will be expected to do for their children before they go to school? If not, how are parents and staff being held accountable for completing this morning wellness check? For example, some of the private schools are using an app, and if a student's wellness checklist has not been completed and/or they are not green, meaning healthy based on the checklist criteria, students are not admitted to school until they are checked by the school nurse.
Mm-hmm. So we are not currently using an app. Every one of those systems, including the app, does rely on the honor system. So somebody can simply click check, 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 or click green. Same thing that they can do with the actual form. Right now, we are keeping it to our checklist. We're using the same checklist for after school activities and sports that might be in place. But Danelle is exactly right. A lot of this, and even being in the building, is very dependent on our social compact with one another. But none of them are foolproof from being dependent on the honor system. And so part of our programming with students is going to rely very heavily on our civic obligation to one another and keeping each other safe. You know, right from the beginning with what I always say, your mask protects me and my mask protects you. And so we are literally wearing them for one another. So that is something that we are asking for parents' support. We will certainly be enforcing at the school level. But even with an app, we're finding that it is very difficult to be 100% certain that it is completed appropriately. People can really take advantage of any system, and we just have to be hopeful that that isn't going to take place.
The next one is Valerie Frank, 158 Elm. Is it clear that parents will only be informed of a COVID positive person being near their child within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes? Does that mean you will not be informed if your child is in the same class as a child who was positive but not sitting near them? Don't droplets and aerosols move throughout the room? Trying to understand exactly what we will have a right to know when there is a COVID positive child or adult in the same class as our child.
Yeah, again, it is frustrating for all of us that there really is no cut and dry metric. So unfortunately for that scenario as well, I have to say it depends. For example, we have some classes that when they're in session, there are going to be 12 kids spaced 6 feet apart. We have some classes that when they're in session, the in-person is going to have 3 students in it, and they're going to be well over 6 feet apart. There are some spaces that are larger than others. There are some spaces that are, you know, they may have the windows open all day long. All of them are going to have HEPA air purifiers specific to the aerosols. So it unfortunately, it really does depend. Again, we're going by health professional recommendations. We will always err on the side of giving information, but in the meantime, obviously we can't violate privacy laws, but we will always be sure to be more cautious than not. Believe me, if I don't even want to be held to the idea that somebody necessarily has to be positive. If there is an instance, for example, where we have very confident information that somebody was exposed to someone who's confident, perhaps is coughing, sneezing, or otherwise symptomatic, I don't want to be bound to say, well, nobody is COVID positive, so we're not going to ask those people to stay home or work remotely. I really want to be able to have the latitude to err on the side of caution at every single opportunity. So I would love to have a cut and dry metric because it's cut and dry, and it kind of makes things easier for everyone. Certainly for us, it would make things easier, but we just don't want to limit ourselves in terms of providing the safest option for people. And you know, that off the top of my head, that's one scenario or several examples of what could take place. There are even more once we get into school. So we will make it as specific and concrete as possible, but we will always err on the side of caution, to be sure. I know that's not a satisfactory red, green, yellow sort of check yes, check no answer. I would love to provide that, but we are trying to be as safe as possible, knowing that there are many different iterations of what could take place, and we want to be able to make decisions on the fly that based on the specific incidents of the particular conditions of the case.
From Christy McDonough, 14 Cedar Drive. As parents, can we donate any cleaning supplies, soap, bleach, wipes, hand sanitizer, tissues, paper towels, etc., to classrooms?
That is extremely generous and very much appreciated. I do have to say, however, it depends on the product. So we are going to actually be having a meeting with our principals tomorrow, and we'll discuss this as well, so that if you reach out to your principals, they can give you more specific information. What I mean by that is, and this is along the line of nothing can ever be simple, right? What I mean by that is, so for example, we ordered 100 cases of paper towels just to get started. There may be particular schools that, quite frankly, don't have enough room to store things right now, but maybe later in the year will. We have specific fire codes that we have to adhere to in terms of the storage of hand sanitizer. And so we would not be able to accept them if we are at capacity in a particular building, and that could be different by building. So again, I would need you to reach out to your school principal on that. Anything that has chemicals at all, like hand sanitizer or wipes or anything, we need to have on file in our district. It's called an MSDS sheet, which literally details every chemical component of compounds that we use in a school district, what their potential dangers are, cautions, warnings, appropriate use, and so forth. So we really need people to take from a specific list that we may have, that we do have in our buildings. So in other words, no, we can't just take any wipe or any disinfectant or any hand sanitizer. But if you contact your district's school, you can see what the school is using, because if the school is using it, we have the EPA guidelines on it and the MSDS sheet on file. And so you can confirm that it is acceptable for the building. But like I said, and there are some other than fire codes and space and chemicals, there are other things. So it really, I wish it were such a simple thing, and it's very generous that people ask. And yes, there are some things that we would certainly benefit from probably a couple months into the school year, but I am going to ask you to please check with your building principals because of those things that I just mentioned that are very important that we follow as a public school, and obviously for the safety of your children. Is that it, Chrissy?
Okay, thank you, Chrissy.
Sorry about that.
All right.
Oh, wait,
Okay.
somebody just popped up. Actually, I have to wait. Paul, you need to have your last name as well. So once you have your last name, I can ask your question. Oh, okay, here we go. Paul Rohr, 11 Lincoln. Following up on Valerie's question, at what frequency and or level of detail will the district be reporting case counts like we're seeing from colleges? Excuse me. Will this only be district-wide or per building?
It depends, unfortunately. Like I think this was an example I used at the last meeting. If we know a student was out when they were exposed, they haven't been back to school yet, and they've gotten a positive test, and they literally haven't been in school since 48 hours before they were symptomatic, and they've tested positive, and they've been on their remote side of their hybrid model, for example, we likely would not, there has to be a value added for the potential of compromising somebody's privacy. And to say that letting the class know that somebody is absent, which could be very indicative, one student is absent, perhaps even in an entire school. And if there's absolutely no chance of exposure or risk to anybody else, we really don't want to take the risk of identifying a student. So that's an example of, for example, when we wouldn't share that information. There has to be a reason, and the reason, of course, would be if there's any chance of exposure whatsoever. So again, I can't say that every single case that would impact someone's safety, health, welfare, yes, of course we will communicate. If it doesn't, and there is no reason for us to give information that may potentially identify a student, no, we're likely not going to release that information. So was that the whole, I thought there were two parts to that question for some reason.
No, I don't think so. I think you answered that.
Okay, sorry.
All right, thank you. Okay, Superintendent Notes.
So let me see. I really just had one. I don't know that this has to be a vote necessarily. The Department of Education did say in collaboration with MIAA that school committees did need to vote if you were going to let remote students participate in athletics. However, they've not said that about anything else. They also haven't had the advantage of some organization like the MIAA advocating on their behalf. So that brings, for example, after school activities that can be safely done, or activities outside of school like band. Not marching band, we're not looking to go in that direction just yet because of the movement and the proximity of many people at once. We want to limit cohorts. But for example, like having band practice or even a performance. In late fall, having a performance outside with appropriate social distancing and so forth, if you would allow remote students to participate in that. Now, keep in mind some of those students will be part of the class that may or may not be associated with that after school activity, and they will be participating in the class during the school day, but after school. I don't know that you have a particular objection to that. It certainly seems to run along the lines of sports, and I would be inclined to support it with, of course, all the appropriate restrictions and policies. And Jeff Benson has created a music policy that he has run by the Board of Health and would like to run by you. And I would support that. I don't think you need a specific vote that has not been indicated by the Department of Education, but I at least wanted to bring it to your attention. If you wanted to have a vote on it, you certainly could hold for discussion and put it on an upcoming agenda. But it was something that we hadn't considered when we were talking about sports that I think is an important consideration.
Michelle?
I would wholeheartedly support that. I think that, and I don't know the status of clubs or anything, but just as a general rule, if they're part of our school community and just for whatever reason, they're just doing it a different way or what works for them, they should still be a part of everything that they are comfortable being a part of.
Jen?
I agree, and I think the only consideration would be with attendance taking for contact tracing purposes, where normally those students wouldn't have to be considered for contact tracing if they show up to an activity or an event. We
Yes.
would obviously need to do that. But I agree
Yes.
with Michelle that if you, regardless of whether, in my opinion, whether you're remote learning or joining in the hybrid model, you're a part of the school community and should be able to avail yourself of any activities that you feel safe participating in.
And that is part of the plan for both this music department, athletics, is the contact tracing logs.
Caroline?
I agree also with what everyone has said for our remote learners that are enrolled in the Easton Public Schools. And I know that legally we need to offer that opportunity for children that are being homeschooled through the partnership with the Easton. I wouldn't call it exactly a partnership, but I know that the plans are approved by the Easton Public Schools. But there are families that are essentially contracting out. They've withdrawn their kids, I think, officially from school, and they're essentially buying a remote program, or they're participating in a remote program that's provided by another entity. Now, to me, in those cases, they're not really part of the Easton Public Schools anymore because they're enrolled in another, effectively a district, even though it's remote, say the Tech Academy or something like that.
Okay.
But I don't know what the technicalities are with that. That's my understanding from past discussions, but I just am wondering about that.
Yeah, so there are, again, it depends. So there are 2 approved Massachusetts virtual public schools, and that is TECA and Greenfield Academy. And also there are, and a student is officially withdrawn, yes. There are also private or parochial schools that are not public schools that a student can withdraw and attend. However, there are some programs that homeschool parents do make part of their homeschool plans. That doesn't necessarily, they're still students of the Easton Public Schools. Excuse me. Their plans for homeschool need to be accepted by the Easton Public Schools. That is not considered a public or a private school, though. That's a third thing. That's a homeschool plan. So that is different. And then Chrissy can elaborate, but the last thing I wanted to add was you do not by law, you did mention something, you are not required by law to have homeschool students participate in after school activities. MIAA does regulate that you need to allow homeschool students to participate in sports at the high school level, but you as a district have a policy that allows homeschool parents to have part of their plan be participating in some other activities in the Easton Public Schools, but that is not a law. I just wanted to clarify. I know that may have just
No,
been a vernacular
I'm sorry,
thing,
you're
but-
right, you're right, it's a policy, right,
Okay.
okay, but it's still effective, I mean, okay. yeah.
Yes. But people would need to read the school committee policy in Easton because it is different than a lot of other places. And it is not just a cut and dry, you know, you can participate in anything. Chrissy?
If a family were essentially purchasing, if their entire homeschool plan were
Purchased?
purchased, they could still be considered they could still be considered as potential participants in after-school activities if we approved that plan, even though it was a purchased plan.
So if I can chime in here, so
Yeah.
what happens is there are courses that you can register, that a parent can register their child to take. So for example, if there's an online school, a private school, they actually will sell their courses, but not have them enrolled in the school. In that case, then those courses become part of the homeschool plan.
That needs to be approved.
It needs to be approved, which I approve, or I look through the applications. However, there are private schools where the child is fully enrolled. Well, if that's the case, it's similar to a student going to Thayer Academy or BC High or Xavier.
Or Brockton High.
Or Xaverian,
Same as a public school. Yeah.
But I'm just using the private
Yes.
school example that we wouldn't allow those students who attend private schools to attend our after-school activities or sports.
Right.
And that we've been actually sorting through more of the applications and recognizing, because there are a lot of families that do purchase these classes, especially once they get up to more towards the high school, middle school and high school, they do purchase these classes to become part of their homeschool program. But there are families that are just using they're enrolling and then submitting the application for approval as a homeschool application. And we've had to go back and relook, because some of the ones that they are using, they're accredited and some are not. And so we have to, it's been sorting through the management of that.
And that's not necessarily, completely, we have to approve the plan, but we have very specific, and we have strict guidelines that we have to adhere to in order to do that. It's not, Chrissy deciding if she pedagogically and philosophically feels that something's good enough or not. And the state keeps track of the students, and they can only be enrolled in one district at a time. In the state of Massachusetts, they have what's called a LACID, or student identification number, and they can't be in more than one accredited school at a time, whether it's online, parochial, or public. So we can't have them enrolled in two places at the same time. That actually would be, that's very frowned upon, because people could do that intentionally for financial gain. So you cannot do that. That is not allowed. We, of course, would not do that intentionally, which is why we try to vet it very carefully, but you can't do things like that. So we do have some latitude in terms of helping people. We give them guidance as best we can. We can't really do anything for them, of course. That totally defeats the purpose of having a home plan. But we do try to help them as much as we can. We've always, at least as long as I've been here, enjoyed a very good relationship with our homeschool families. And but there are certainly requirements in place. We cannot just make blanket decisions on our own. We have to follow those.
But just for clarity then, if they're actually enrolled though in an online program, but it's actually a school, it's a school, let's say a private school is providing, no. They cannot participate. Right, no. Because they'd be, okay, that makes sense.
They cannot be in two places at once. And believe me, the state is on top of that. That number gets bounced, and they are a big red dot on our screen, and nothing gets processed for us until we rectify that. So
right.
That cannot happen.
So it actually puts us at risk, even if we were
Absolutely.
wanting to be, generous and flexible. It could
Absolutely.
put us at risk.
So-
No, thank you. That was a great explanation. Thank you.
All right, so you want to put this on the next week for a vote from us about remote students and playing sports and clubs and
Well,
music?
at this point, it is not required that you vote on that. So,
Okay.
I mean, I believe
right.
that you could just say that you are extending the consideration that you have for sports to other similar activities, you know, at the superintendent's discretion, for example. Or if you decided you needed that to be a vote and you wanted it to be at your discretion and you wanted to, you know, have authority over each group, you certainly could do that and make that a vote next week.
All right, so if everyone wants to go ahead, Michelle.
Well, I think you're gonna ask that question. I am totally comfortable with Leisha and Chrissy being able to field that. With the understanding that my support would be behind anybody within the criteria we just discussed that would be considered technically ours and part of our community, that they be allowed to participate in whatever we would
All
offer
right,
to
so-
any student.
All right, so right now, can I have thumbs up or thumbs down on this remote student participation? If you're in favor, thumbs up. Okay, you got it, Dr. Cabral.
You think that's an
you
illegal
ever get-
vote?
That was very official.
Thank you.
We're moving our thumbs. Okay. Do you have anything else, Dr. Cabral, for superintendent
That's it.
notes?
That's
Okay,
all.
thank you. Assistant superintendent notes.
So I just wanted to give everyone an update. As you know, we had addressed that we were having trouble with getting Chromebooks in due to stopping at the border of many Chromebooks throughout the country. So it's actually a nationwide shortage on Chromebooks. Worldwide, yeah. I happily want to share with you that currently within the district, we have 2,200 Chromebooks. So, and we have more, we have a large shipment coming next week. This is a true credit to our Director of Technology, John Sousa, who did not take no for an answer when we were told that we were not getting the Chromebooks in time. So we do have some that will be delayed still because they are specialized. However, the most students will be getting the Chromebooks by the first week of school. So just wanted to share that good news. Michelle?
Do you have, Chrissy, do you have that picture you can put up on the screen? The picture of the Chromebooks in the gym?
Oh, I have it.
We probably don't want to let the general public. Remember on Facebook, like everybody outside of Easton can kind of see. I'm not sure we want to like pinpoint exactly where
I thought that was
hundreds
an
of
awesome
thousands of
picture.
technology is being stored right now.
Oh, exactly.
That
Michelle.
would be true.
It's actually a question to follow up on the Chromebooks with Chrissy. It was a post on Facebook and I said I'd follow up, and so now I'm doing that. And Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you're in this thread. So people who currently have a Chromebook in their possession, I know something went out that said that they would be notified, well, for people who don't, they would be notified to come pick up a Chromebook and they'd have to sign something. What is the process for people who currently have one in their possession?
One of ours.
Are there paperwork?
One of ours. Yes. Yeah. So John Sousa, the technology department will be reaching out to those people to have a waiver signed, and not a waiver, acceptable use policy signed or
Yeah,
acceptable use.
They have an inventory of everyone who was loaned a computer, but because of the quick turnaround in the spring, we did not have the appropriate paperwork to go with it. So he is going to contact all of the people that have them, and he is going to have them fill out the paperwork that all the people are getting now have.
And the second part of their question was about updates. Do those get automatically pushed out, or would they have to, is there such a thing as that needing to be done?
So we are looking at, that's part of one of the things that we're looking at to purchase, which would be a system to push out updates automatically for all of our computers. And so that would be funded through our grant money, the COVID relief money, that the CARES Act. So that is something that we will be utilizing.
Right, thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, thanks.
All right. And so do you have anything else, Chrissy, on your assistant superintendent notes?
Yeah, I just also wanted to say thank you to, we have two speakers coming and speaking with our staff, one for social emotional learning, Dr. Robert Brooks, who's a highly acclaimed psychiatrist, and Teresa Davenport actually was, she recommended him, reached out to him, and did a lot of the legwork to bring him. So we're really excited to hear him. His talk is on resilience in the face of COVID-19. So we know that he's really going to be supportive of how we're working with our students. And then also, as you know, we have a very strong relationship with Raising Multicultural Kids, a wonderful organization in town that really helps make a difference in the lives of our students, and works very collaboratively with the Easton Public Schools. And I know that they worked with Letitia Fusel from Stonehill and had a wonderful session with her. And due to that, and some of our staff participating in that, we are also bringing her to speak to our staff around social justice. So, these partnerships and how everyone goes above and beyond to bring the best of the best to Easton, to support us and help us. It's so appreciated. And we really rely heavily on those partnerships, Raising Multicultural Kids, for example, but also with Dr. Davenport going out and soliciting on her own time to bring the speaker to us. We're just so appreciative of their efforts. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. School committee notes, Caroline.
Well, first of all, I listened to Leisha's opening day address, and the opening day, well, I guess there were several addresses, but Leisha's, I have to say that was the most upbeat address in the face of an extremely challenging time that I could possibly imagine. It was really great. It's also interesting to hear about that filter, but we can talk about that some other time. But, and Nancy, you made the perfect welcoming comments, so I really appreciate that.
It was
Well, it was just, it was
Thank you.
sincere. It was exactly, the perfect thing to say. So I thank you very much for that. I just, a friend sent me a document, from their own child's school, and it's something that Leisha has touched on several times, but so I'm paraphrasing, but there was an interesting, it's along this idea about our protecting each other, in our communities. And this, one of the sentences was, we must all weigh our individual choices against the risks those choices pose for others. I know that what we're seeing nationally is that a lot of new cases are being traced to ceremonies, get-togethers, parties, weddings, funerals, all barbecues in the backyard. I think everyone says, well, we're just going to do this one thing or these three things or whatever. But all of these things, every one of them adds up. And I think we really all want our children to be back in school safely, along with our staff also safely back in school. And that is honestly not going to be possible, at least not for an extended period, unless people really do kind of weigh their choices. And I would say particularly people who want their children in school, the more cocooned they stay during that period as we're trying to get back into school, I think the better, because everything that everyone's doing is affecting all the rest of us. That's nothing new. And as I said, Leisha more eloquently than I already spoke about this, but I really do think it's a question of weighing the choices that we make so that all of us will benefit. Anyway, that's all I have for today, but thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Michelle.
I actually do not have anything tonight. I feel like I talked a lot as we went along.
You did not talk a lot. Are you sure you're all set?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Jackie,
I don't have anything tonight. I'm all set.
well, you did a lot too. You've all done a lot, everybody. All right, Jen. Come on.
Just want to talk about, there were three events actually set up in the past week for either community or special ed support. So just again, thank you to our special services department. There was a webinar last week by Mass Support, which is a statewide coalition of mental health providers. The keynote speaker there was a woman named Dr. Christian Braithwaite, and she was a phenomenal resource. So thank you to Teresa Skinner for, I believe it was Teresa who shared that out to the district. There were 800 people on that call. So it was really, really valuable in just terms of helping understand what collectively we're going through and the range of normal responses to an incredibly abnormal situation. So it was very reassuring. And then there was a CPAC town hall earlier this week. I actually wasn't able to attend that because I think I was on probably the Mass School Committee thing at the same time. And then the first of the two broader community support sessions for social and emotional health with Dr. Turk, that was, I believe, Tuesday night, and was pretty well attended and really, really great, valuable information. So I would encourage as many families as possible to tune in to the next one, which is on September 14th. There's just a lot of good information about, you know, what you're going through, what your children are going through, how to best prepare everybody for school, for resilience. And because it was just for Easton, she was able to get into some pretty detailed Q&A that I found pretty valuable to listen to. So I encourage people to tune into that. And then I just want to say I've run into some school staff around town since they've been in for professional development this week, and it's been really great to see the positive response and the excitement about being back in their buildings and seeing their colleagues again. So I hope that positive energy continues. It was really, really great to see.
Thanks, Jen. Yes, I did like that webinar that we watched with Dr. Braithwaite. That was really, I enjoyed that one a lot. Okay, so let me finish up here. I have had a lot of questions when I've seen people. Is the new school happening? And I said, it sure is. And I think I got an email the other day about it. So things are going in the right direction as far as I know. Correct, Dr. Cabral?
Yes, it happens that we were not in an active construction phase at all. That has affected other projects around the Commonwealth. We are finishing up the design phase. So that's very much in the hands of the designers and the architects. And so they continued working throughout all the closures and everything. And we met remotely to answer any questions they had, that kind of thing. So we were probably in a very sweet spot in the entire process where we could really keep things going. It goes out to bid in December in terms of a construction. At that point, it will be very interesting to see where is the market then, where is the industry at that point? Is this going to really help us? Perhaps in terms of securing multiple bids of people who maybe haven't had projects. Might it swing the other way? We don't know. We don't have an indication that it will at this point, but we're keeping a very close eye on that. But as of now, it has had absolutely no impact on the project. We are on date and on budget, and everything is going full steam ahead.
Thank you. I also attended an MASC meeting on August 31st. It was about communication. And I think we'll all agree, some of it was great, some of it wasn't, but it was interesting. And it's always nice to hear from, different people across the state. And then they sent us, there were a few things they talked about that are going around in the country and how people are staff and administrators are welcoming everybody back and just trying to keep it uplifting and because we so need to get back to normalcy, but we have to be careful, cautious, and safe. So that was a nice meeting. Yes, yesterday's opening address, very good. I liked the little video, the kid superintendent video, that was cute. And of course, I was lucky enough to be at graduation in Harrison Webster, plus the other speeches that day were really good too. Our next meeting is September 10th, next Thursday, 5 o'clock, Zoom. And please, if you have anything to email us or whatever, please do. Do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a
O'Neill
second?
seconds.
Okay, thank you. And all those in favor?
O'Neill, yes.
Durant, yes?
DeLuca, yes.
Wiseman, yes.
Star, yes.
Thank you very much, everybody, and good night.
Thank you. Night,
Have a good
guys.
weekend.
Yes, nice long weekend.
All right.